Hello, crypto boys and ghouls, and welcome back to the channel, Tales from the Cryptmancer, where we feature content on play and earn games on the blockchain, such as Splinterlands. And in today's video, I have a special guest with me today. He may be coming to Rebellion battles in the arenas near you very, very soon. And we've got an interesting conversation that I think very well we just share with our YouTube audience today, because I think it's very timely and also very interesting. So with that being said, let me introduce everyone here to Lorkus. Lorkus, welcome to the channel.
Thank you, Tails. It's great to be here. It's been a while since I've been on one of your streams. This is great.
I know, and it's not even a stream. It's as we're going to be making this for a video for YouTube. And, you know, I think it's interesting because we were chatting earlier tonight about the topic of, you know, the value of Chaos Legion packs and cards and the Wild League and Soulbound reward cards. And you had some really interesting thoughts on this. And I just wanted to kind of pick your brain and see where you're at. And for those who don't know you in the audience, maybe you could kind of give a summary of kind of where your head is with Splinterlands. I know, you know, you've been heavily, you know, investing in Chaos Legion and Rebellion and Rift Watchers and promo cards. Where are you at first with the game, and where do you think the vision is here for you and the game in the future?
Oh man, that's a big one. Let me. I guess I'll start. Where to start? I think the game has done very well. I think the best thing about it is the fact that it's more than a game. It's an ecosystem, and a lot of the levers of that ecosystem have the ability to really drive community and make this a place that people want to be, and it's something they want to be involved with. So maybe that's where to start. Now, the current state of the game. This is probably going to sound less optimistic than I feel, but to me, the state of the game right now is that we are doing much better than we were a few months ago, for the primary reason that nothing new has been promised to us to not get delivered on time. We haven't gotten a lot of new things come out, but we also haven't been promised something and been asked to pay for something. That's just another promise. So I actually am very happy about that. So maybe that sounds pessimistic, but to me it's very optimistic. So I'm excited about where the game's going, and I'm excited to see what Matt can do with time and the reins to make changes and improve on his vision.
Sure. I mean, it makes sense. And like you mentioned, I mean, we haven't been, you know, just, I guess, had a lot of pre-sales thrown at us as money grabs per se. It's really been, you know, if you're buying something in the game, you're getting that value in the form of cards or what have you, which is fine. You know, there's certainly been, the salt lords have been mining lots of salt recently in the community. I would say it's pretty brutal out there.
It doesn't quite fit the analogy, but I would actually say they're somehow planting salt, not just mining it.
Yeah, it's definitely a sodium-rich environment right now, and you know, I think one of the things, and we kind of know some of the challenges that exist, you know, with the game as far as cards and SPS and stuff like that. The community's talked circles around that, but what I thought you know came with some interesting ideas and concepts that I hadn't really heard before, and I think it would be really great to share kind of where your head's at around possible ideas that Matt and the team could leverage to really, like you mentioned, get things back on track, get the game in a much better state, and get the game ready to grow and to kind of spread its wings and fly again. And, you know, we kind of had an initial conversation talking about the concept of, you know, where Chaos Legion packs were headed from a price perspective. And we talked a little bit about Soulbound reward card unlocking, and what you had come up with or mentioned was an idea about card ownership being a key factor to discourage like bot farms, but not discourage the small players like the silver, the bronze players that are kind of like the bread and butter of the ecosystem. Can you maybe elaborate on what that would look like in your mind and how it would be different than anything else that may have been discussed previously in the community?
Sure, but I would actually like to back up just a little bit, and I would like to tie it to something that at least was mentioned in the community. I don't know if it got a lot of traction, but I don't know. Over a year ago, there were some discussions that several people had. I'm pretty confident didn't come up with with it, but I talked about it at least with Aftersound and maybe some other people. Um, that to me, is back when CP was one of the limiting factors for being able to go up leagues and decide where you landed, not just play. And one of my concerns with that is it really encouraged renting, let's call them non-meta cards that were low value to boost your CP and then just sit there. And it discouraged what we actually want from our community, which is owning, buying cards, and playing. So it was kind of counterproductive. And that's really where this idea that I was discussing with you today came from, was how do we actually encourage the holding of cards, and not just the cards that you like the most or play with the most, but the cards that were part of that set, even if they're ones that are non-meta and maybe not as useful in your day-to-day gaming. Like, we need to find a way to encourage people to hold those. So as you were mentioning, some of the problems with the game, this kind of from my perspective that this could address specifically, are proliferation of bot farms. To me, that's one of the biggest issues, is bot farms that don't have a sufficient stake in the game. Like, whether that means renting everything, only having sold out reward cards, all of the above. Maybe their only actual stake in the game was buying a spell book, and maybe not even that. Maybe they bought a second or aftermarket account, and they maybe rent their SPS, or maybe they solely stake it, but they have a very small stake in the game relative to what they're earning, because they're able to exploit these really great ideas that have been implemented, namely rentals. Let's just start with rentals. And rentals is something that I really, really like in the concept. It's something that really encouraged me to get more involved in the game at the beginning, because it meant that there was multiple ways to use my assets. But as good as renting is, and as interesting as it is for holders of cards, it's even more interesting and it's even better for bot farms. Because in the past, they could just rake in a bunch of low CP cards and sit at the top of the leaderboard and risk nothing. And now they can just rent cards and earn more on them than the owner could, just by picking certain ones and exploiting the current game state. So to me, we're not really encouraging players to play, and we're not encouraging what we'd really like is for people to hold cards. We're encouraging that through our SPS scaling factors for reward shares, but we don't really have a good way of doing this for cards, other than Rebellion. Obviously, the conflict system has really encouraged not renting and holding Rebellion cards, but there isn't any similar concept in the rest of the game ever since the large SPS airdrop stopped. At least nothing that I'm aware of. And it seems like, as you mentioned, a lot of the things that are possible really would hurt small holders or medium holders, or maybe everybody, not just bots. So part of what we had talked about, I guess one of the biggest things we talked about was finding a way to encourage people to hold cards, and hold cards for the relevant sets that they're playing in. So SPS staking allows that scaling factor, but before you even have that scaling factor, to me, there should be a percentage on your earnings based on the percentage of a set that is owned. So if you're playing in Wild, that would be the percentage of Wild cards owned. And if you only had Soulbound reward cards, they wouldn't count for anything. So Soulbound reward cards shouldn't count for that percentage, but they should be able to be used. That would mean that smaller players that have earned Soulbound reward cards don't have to spend their GEC to unlock them in order to earn, but that they wouldn't be an earning mechanism by themselves. They would just be a way to enhance your earnings. You would still need to stake SPS for your multiplier, but your actual scaling factor on your R shares from the beginning would actually be based on how much of that set you've owned, and that would encourage people to hold cards like Cobalt Bruiser and Frost Lion, which don't get a lot of love, but just meaning that affected your base earning. I think would be interesting, and it would mean that Wild, to actually earn in Wild, you would have to have a lot of cards, which I think was originally the idea, was that this was supposed to be the place that that Alpha and Beta and all of the sets that came after that shifted out of Modern went to go live their great life, was in this place where you needed like a lot of flexibility in order to succeed, and that's currently not what's required to succeed in Wild. So I think this is a way that we could do that. And then kind of a side part of this, I mentioned that rentals have the ability to extract from our community in a big way, where delegations pretty much invariably happen with someone that you know or at least have talked to a little. So I would love to see that that there be some sort of reward penalty for rented cards. I don't know if that's only 50% or 75% of their value for rented cards versus delegated or owned cards. But to me, that could put more of the power back into the community's hands and have a lot less earning potential for bot farms that rent and own little to nothing.
Yeah, I think this is a very it's very interesting, and let me see if I can summarize it from a conceptual ideal perspective, because we covered a lot there, or you covered a lot there with kind of the idea as a whole, and basically what you're saying is essentially that the way you would calculate your R shares moving forward in this kind of new idea or new world of Splinterlands for rewards would be it'd be a combination. Our share formula would be a combination of the staked SPS reward share formula that exists today, but you would also add a component that was an R share multiplier or additive based on your card assets, meaning that as you played the game in whether it's the Wild format or the Modern format, you would get additive or percentage of R shares for your card assets separate from your SPS staking based on the cards that you either owned or had delegated at 100% bonus or multiplier additive, whatever you want to call it, mathematically speaking. Soulbound reward cards wouldn't earn you anything as far as those cards in your collection, but they wouldn't take away either. They would just allow you to basically win more games and be more competitive if you had them. And then if you rented cards, there would be not necessarily a penalty, but there would be not 100% value for your R share for card assets for those particular pieces. And the formula would look at the entirety of the league set to come up with that additive multiplier for card asset ownership, meaning if it was Wild, it would be all, every card that you owned or had delegated or had rented would contribute based on let's say a percentage or a mathematical formula based on all the available cards in the Wild format. And the same thing would be said for Modern. So the more, for example, if we can simplify it with Modern, the more Chaos Legion, Rift Watchers, Rebellion that you owned or had delegated or in some degrees rented, that would, at the account level, that would contribute to your earnings in that league level. So it would not just be SPS staking contributing to that mathematical formula, but in some form or fashion, your assets would be a part of that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think you summarized it quite well. The only thing I would add is promo cards as well.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, promo cards as well. Absolutely. Certainly important. So what we're saying here with this idea of yours is it's a combination of card asset ownership or delegation or renting coupled with the SPS staking or renting that combines a mathematical formula to show your reward shares. So the more you have invested or more skin in the game you have, the more rewards you get out of it. And this is kind of, to your point, going back and rewarding those players that have a stake in the game, and they're going to get more as a result of that. It doesn't. I think it addresses some points around soulbound reward cards that are important, as well as the rental market that you touched on. And I think it could be very interesting because, in theory, it would add value back to those assets. Because now, again, because I'm assuming you wouldn't be able to stake those cards on land and still get the benefits of having them in your playing deck for this kind of reward share. It'd have to be one or the other, correct? For wild specifically?
I would think so, because to me, this is my viewpoint here, is that I'm not trying to discourage people with disposable income from spending it on the games. So people that have land and a bunch of cards, I think it's totally fine. They need to make a choice and buy more cards if they want to do both. What I'm trying to protect is the smaller players that, as you mentioned, are the bread and butter of our game. We need lots of players to come in that can't own a bunch of land and probably can't buy all the cards. We need these players to come in and have a place. And I think that our larger players have already are willing to sink tokens into things, and there's no reason to stop that. There's just I think there's an opportunity here to rip the floor out under bot farms without destroying your large players and without crushing your small players. And I'm looking for that middle ground. I feel like that's probably a fairly narrow path, and we failed at it so far.
Right.
So looking for a way to really rip out what they're depending on for their income stream that we're funding would be ideal.
Sure. And I guess maybe we can play devil's advocate, or at least put ourselves maybe in the shoes of, let's say, a silver player today that may not have a huge card collection necessarily. But in this scenario, if this at a snap of the fingers change took place, at a conceptual level, one might think that your silver level players would get less combined R shares in this new world because they don't necessarily own 100% of the modern set. They might own, let's say, 20% or 10% or something like that. But in the grand scheme of things, because they do own some cards, or maybe they have some delegated or maybe some rented, they're going to be in a better shape than, let's say, well, I guess we'd have to use wild as an example because bots are only, in wild technically or theoretically. But because bot farms generally only have soulbound reward cards and, 1 BCX rentals these days, because of that fact, the bot reward share going to those accounts would be significantly less compared to those silver players that actually own cards and have assets. So in theory, right, if we flip this switch and made this change in a game mechanic perspective, bot farms would be the ones impacted more significantly based on their kind of trends in history. Silver level players should see increased rewards, and those players probably at gold and higher that have, let's say a medium size or larger collections should see probably an increase in rewards depending on how many assets they own. So I think what it does is it rebalances theoretically the reward shares and pushes more value to asset ownership, which is ultimately the goal of Matt that he's always said, right? He wants people to combine cards, to own cards, and participate in the ecosystem rather than simply take advantage of rental arbitrages and 1 BCX loopholes and match liquidity and ratings inflation and stuff like that. So in theory, this would seem to be a nice compromise or balance to kind of adjust the disbursement of rewards, not only in modern, but more probably in wild, right?
Exactly. So I think if I could rephrase that, it's that the R shares might decrease for your silver bronze player, but their percentage of the SPS pool would go up.
Right. Yeah, it would be very interesting to model this. Have Splinterlands maybe take a look at this and model this and see what a formula could look like and run some analytics to see what it would mean for, because I think Splinterlands the company kind of knows which accounts are silver accounts or silver players versus bot farms versus the leaderboard players. They could probably segment their users into kind of use cases and sample accounts and see what this might be based on historical data and see how the balance would look. Like I said, when I heard the idea, it sounded definitely not only feasible from a development perspective on how it could be implemented, but it made a lot of sense conceptually as well. And I think it bears, or warrants investigation, right? Or at least, let's talk about it with the team, maybe through folks like Dave McCoy and Clay and others to say, hey, this is an idea we should chat about, see if it makes sense. Because if we're talking about a new player experience and we want to encourage people to own assets, combine cards, and see value, this could be one such way that the ecosystem benefits, across the board, right?
Absolutely. And I'm sure that my hot take is not the ultimate answer here. So I think this larger discussion would give a lot more people opportunities to help temper this and find the solution that works the best for the community. That would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, like I said, I think it's a novel or interesting idea. I hadn't really necessarily heard this specific take, or at least recently. And I know we, like you said, it maybe had origins back in the CP days, which are kind of well behind us at this point in time. But I think this kind of hybrid thought process.
Good old bad days of CP.
Yeah. Well, I think this is definitely interesting. And, now's the time where the sodium content in the environment is very high. Let's provide some of these ideas to the team. Let's see if there are good ideas that can be leveraged as part of this new player experience. And let's get us on the right track. Because at the end of the day, anyone who's listening to this video and has a vested interest in the Splinterlands ecosystem, we all want to see, token values go up. We all want to see DC at peg, the SPS flywheel, taking place. We want to see card assets, instead of declining, at least stabilizing or increasing over time. And if this is a way that we could do that and address some issues in the ecosystem from a overall macro Splinterlands economic perspective, then it definitely bears or warrants conversation. And I appreciate you coming to chat with us about this idea and sharing it with us. Hopefully we've done at least a reasonable job of taking the idea conceptually and communicating it. And yeah, I think let's throw it out to the community via this video and see what kind of feedback and comments we get. And what would you like to close with here, Lorkus, as we talked about this idea at a pretty high level?
How about a joke?
Sure.
Sorry, this is going to be a dad joke. But why don't salty people like brainstorming?
I do not know.
Because whenever there's an idea that floats, they try to bring it down to sea level.
Oh man, that's bringing science into this. Now you're making my brain hurt with chemistry lessons from the past. Yes, indeed.
But in all, from the aside that joke, I do hope that that we can have a conversation where we can figure out some good solutions going forward. I don't think we have a single solution that's going to solve all of our problems or make everyone happy, but a good conversation can go a long way.
Absolutely. Great stuff, Lorkus. Well, thanks for joining us here and talking to us about this idea. I think it's very interesting. Definitely want to share it with the community. Also looking forward to this very handsome summoner here that we're going to have gracing us in our Rebellion decks soon. This dual element fire and death powerhouse coming our way soon. Next airdrop. Anything you want to drop here as we close off this video, and the upcoming airdrop being, of course, your legendary summoner?
Yeah, everybody go get the summoner. I think that at least for the next 30 days after it comes out, it's going to be super OP. So have fun with it.
Indeed. Get those Rebellion packs open, get those cards staked on your wagons, and good luck with the upcoming airdrop. Until next time, everyone, keep stacking those stats. Appreciate you.